Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to hop into the second part of our series on completing companies' due diligence. If you didn't watch the first video, we talk high level about some of the key stats, how to pull them down, and how to find their most recent 10Ks and 10Qs from the SEC website. In this video, I'm going to walk through what I'm looking for in a 10K and then also just talking a little bit about their investor relations website and some information you might find there. So what we'll go ahead and do, we're going to go ahead and navigate over to their most recent 10K. I like to start with the 10K. It has a lot more information than the 10Q. So let's go ahead and head over to sec.gov. Once you're at sec.gov, we're going to go ahead and click on more search options in this top right corner. From here, we'll go ahead and type in this stock ticker, which is WMT for Walmart. And what we can do, you can actually filter by filing type. So I'll filter for 10K, and then the most recent one will be at the top. So let's go ahead and open that up. And just to note, one of the first things I always do is I read the 10K from start to finish, and I record my notes in Excel or Word, usually Excel because there's some tables that I like to copy over. But let's go ahead and open this up. And first what we'll do is let's just take a quick look at a table of contents. This will be pretty standard for most 10Ks. But if we look here, part one, these items right here, items 1 through 4, this is going to usually talk a lot about the company, its reporting segments, higher level company information that's interesting and be good to know before diving too deep into the company. A good example of where there's some really relevant information is recently I read the Bristol Myers Squibb 10K, and they talk a lot about like the life cycle of a drug in development and manufacturing. And if if you're not super familiar with the pharmaceutical space, there's a lot of great information to be found in there that can kind of fill in some notes for any gaps of knowledge you might have. The second part two, if we look at this, this is mostly going to cover financial information. And then the MD&A, which is the management discussion and analysis. So if you ever see abbreviated MD&A or hear someone say that, that's just the management discussion of analysis. And this is one of the best areas to read a few times, to be honest. This is where management's to talk a lot about the most recent results of the company and anything critical to its operations. This third section usually isn't going to have too much information. I'll have all these kind of areas to select from, but most of the time it's going to actually just tell you to like refer to the proxy statement. So if we actually jump down to section 3, I'll show you here. It says executive compensation, and you'll see it's like included in our proxy statement, included in our proxy statement. So what this is, there's a proxy statement that is released every year annually for voting on the company, and in that proxy statement, they'll talk about executive compensation. And that's also available on the SEC website, but we're not going to cover that today. And then the last section, part 4, this is usually just going to link you back up to other things, or sometimes it'll actually have the amended, it'll have like an appendix with financial statements. But if we jump to this, you'll see it actually just links us back up to other parts of the document for where these things are actually located in here. But still good to understand and to know. So, I think something to keep in mind as you read a 10K, what I'm actually looking for is just any information that helps me understand the company better. So this could be things like their competitive advantage, how they generate revenue, key statistics, interesting facts, if they have any information on who they view as their competitors, any major litigation, any one-time costs that occurred in this year that may not occur in the next year, where they're making their investments, what they're focusing on. And then the second thing I really look at is financial information and trying to just find the most granular level of detail they provide on the revenue aspect, because that'll help us when we build out our financial model. So let's go ahead and hop into the 10K now, and I'll show you the notes that I took when I read through this and explain kind of why I recorded this. So let me pull that up. So here's the notes I took, and you can see not too much, but so the first thing really, as I was kind of scrolling through in this part 1, is within this general section, some key things they mentioned. They serve 240 million customers a week at 11,400 stores, right? They operate under 54 banners in 26 countries. Price leadership is the keystone to their business. And then they operate under 3 segments. So this will be, they'll always kind of tell us somewhere in this first section how they operate, how they report out their revenue. And this is important just as we build out the financial model. But the thing I really saw here, and the reason I recorded these things is, right, 240 million customers a week. This can let me know, like, if we want to forecast revenue based off customer growth, how many more customers could we expect them to actually bring under their belt? stores? Are they, do we want to factor in rapid expansion? Do we want to come up with an average customer per store? So just kind of some of those key numbers. And then, price leadership. I think this is important because a lot of times on a revenue estimates, you might be like, oh, we could increase price, but based off that, right, we know Walmart is everyday low prices. They're probably not going to start to increase prices on consumers, so they're probably not going to grow from that aspect. Um, and then, so some more notes I took in this section, the development of the company. Let me zoom in a little bit. And this file will be available so you can download it and read through my notes. Um, but development of the company, this is just a little bit more about the history of the company, which I think is pretty interesting. Um, just kind of talks about how Walmart was conceived, started out as some brothers that started a franchise, and then it kind of grew from there. And they morphed it into what is now Walmart. And then they break out into kind of some of the more of their segments, so Walmart US, International, and Sam's Club. So within US, they tell us, number of stores, omni-channel. They hit on omni-channel a lot. This is a big focus for them. If you're not familiar with omni-channel, this is the idea that it's the same consumer experience regardless of what channel you purchase through. So if you buy in store or you buy online, it's all kind of trying to be the same cohesive experience regardless of where you buy, and kind of ultimately put the customer first. So, interesting that they're going to be, investing a lot there. They talk about their different store types in the US, how big they are, um, you know, merchandise. They have 3 units, grocery, general merchandise, health and wellness. So those are kind of the 3 big areas they look at when they look at merchandise. Distribution, they have 156 distribution facilities. So you can see I'm really trying to pull out the information that, is kind of relevant to the business, how large it is, what's really happening. Distribution facilities, I think that's interesting to understand because we could go try to see if we can find Amazons and see how big are they from a distribution standpoint compared to Amazon. So can they really rival the e-commerce aspect of Amazon, or are they still really far behind on a capital investment? Things like that. So that's why I kind of pulled that out. And then same thing for Walmart International. They have some interesting stuff, 221 distribution facilities internationally. And then a little bit about Sam's Club. They have different membership types, so that's interesting if we want to, kind of forecast out and model the revenue based off that. And so you can see as I'm kind of reading through this 10K over here, Walmart US segment, omni-channel, merchandise, operations, competition, distribution, and then it goes to the international aspect. So you can see as I'm reading this, I'm taking notes and recording what I think is relevant and could be useful as I try to model out the company. Sam's Club. So this is kind of where we're at in the notes, right? Membership type, you can see I copied this table over, merchandise, operations, distribution, and then they kind of go into some other things. So from there, human capital. I recorded an interesting note here. As you scroll down, they have this human capital management. So 2.3 million employees, 1.6 million in the US, 700,000 internationally. And the split is they're mostly hourly employees, 64% full time. So, is there a risk of union? That's something that you could kind of extrapolate out of here and understand what could the impact of a union be to a company like Walmart. And then another interesting note, 75% of their salaried store, club, and supply chain management started careers in hourly positions. So they do a lot of promotion within. So that could be good for the longer term cohesiveness of the company and building leaders internally. So, I think that kind of covers a lot of this first section. And then if we move into 1A, right, this is going to be risk factors. Usually these are pretty generic. I still read through them, but they're pretty generic. And if you look at it, it's like, if we don't respond to customer trends or preferences, it could negatively impact us, right? Performance of strategic alliances. So, I mean, it's pretty boilerplate stuff. Good to read through though, if you've never read a 10K, but I usually just kind of glance over and read the bold parts, and then if it sounds interesting, I'll dig a little bit more. Then they talk about some financial risks like foreign exchange, market expectations, and then some legal risks. Um, and it's good to read for a first time. Um, if it's the first time reading a 10K, and definitely skim through it, but not going to be the most information there. Item 2, they talk about the properties. So I didn't copy this table over just because it's so big and I don't know what I would do with it. But I made a note just saying summary of properties by state and international. So if we're looking at potential places to expand, things like that, what kind of stores do they have? You could get a good idea of, where the market opportunities really lay. So recorded where it is, but didn't copy the table over. And then the same thing for international, right? So we can see where they're primarily located. And then item 3, if we scroll down, is going to be legal proceedings, and there's more information in at the end, I believe, on these, but good to understand kind of the high-level litigation they're going through and the risks that that could proceed. And then we move into part 2. So this is going to be kind of the start of the financial stuff. It'll always start out with a table on how the stock has performed to the S&P and then their peer companies. And it looks like they are saying their peer index is the S&P 500 retailing index. So, you might not think much of that the first time you look at it, but what we could do now is we could go look up the S&P 500 retail index. We could look at the 5 or 6 largest companies in there, and those could probably be pretty good competitors to think about for Walmart from that standpoint. Um, and then as we kind of scroll through, you'll see the numeric returns compared to those indexes. And then selected financial data right here, it says, it's not in here. So usually that just means it's somewhere else in the document, whether the appendix or just further down below. And then we get into section 7, the MD&A. So definitely read through this. And it's interesting, right? Like it'll talk about acquisitions they've recently done. So Flipkart, they're divesting Walmart Brazil and Walmart UK, I believe, is what I've read in here, or they're in Walmart Japan. So I guess they've already divested Walmart Brazil, and then Walmart UK and Walmart Japan are assets held for sale. So they back those out, so you get some of that information in here. If you read through the COVID update, they'll say, right, incurred 4 billion of costs associated with the global pandemic. So right there, we could assume next year, as we're building in our FY22 projections, that their cost base is going to drop $4 billion, all else equal. So, you get some interesting notes like that. And then they'll talk about just different performance metrics. So right here, right, we have same store sales. And we can see in 2021 with fuel 8.7, but we can see fuel is negatively impacting these by 0.2 and 3.4%. So Sam's Club, right, if you neutralize for the impact of fuel, really grew 12% on a retail standpoint, but their fuel is down. So just something interesting to think about, and definitely something that we'll probably incorporate in our model somehow if we go down the same store sales growth rate aspect of forecast revenue. And talk more about their operating discipline, strategic capital allocation. So this is their CapEx and where they're investing. So we can see, right, it looks like they're investing kind of decreasing remodels. New stores is doubled, e-commerce about flat, but we can kind of see where they're in Walmart International is declining. So you can kind of give an idea of where they're investing their capital and understand where their strategic priorities really lie. And as we kind of continue through here, right, page 37, they're going to calculate ROI and ROE for us, or ROA and ROI. So kind of a non-GAAP measure, but they walk you through how they calculate it. So this could be a useful calculation if we go try to compare them to Target, Amazon, something else, and see how those companies' ROAs are and ROIs. So definitely good charts here, and right, I recorded the note they have, and then on page 38, they give us free cash flow and how they calculate free cash flow. So that could be something, maybe we try to reconcile to, but it looks like they're just doing operating cash flow from operating activities and then subtracting out CapEx. There might be some stuff in here that we don't like, so we may calculate free cash flow a little bit differently, but you could pull that as a free cash flow estimate, or if you wanted to use that, any quick, metrics to do like free cash flow to whatever multiples. So another thing that's good to know. And then they talk a little bit about inventories in here, and then we get into kind of some segment operating discussions. So I didn't pull any of this information out because I know there's going to be another segment below that breaks out net sales better by division. That'll usually be near the end of a 10K, but they talk about all the segments, how they performed, and what the drivers are. So if we look at international, I think they might tell us somewhere in here, if I remember correctly, that they have the UK and Japan for sale. I don't know where it's located in here, but somewhere within this document they talk about that, talk about Sam's Club, how it's operating, and then kind of move into some other stuff. So liquidity, can they meet their financial needs, things of that nature, and kind of talk through some of these sub accounts of what's really going on. If you go kind of look back at the balance sheet and cash flow statements, things like that. Capital resources, they'll tell you how they're rated for their commercial paper and long-term debt. So AA rating, that's pretty good. I think double B is considered, or triple B is like junk bond. And then corporates are kind of above that, and a AA, AAA rating are pretty good. I mean, AAA being kind of like the highest credit quality in large governments usually, and so a AA rating is pretty good. Talk about some contractual obligations, other matters, right? So I mean, you can read through this. They talk about their inventory method. So they use LIFO, but they say based off LIFO and FIFO, it's about the same. Valuation aspect. So a lot of good information in there. And then, talk a little bit about market risk. And then we get into the financial statements. So this is an important area. We'll copy these over at a later video. But right, you'll have your full income statement. And this is high level, right? So it doesn't break it out by division or segment, just net sales. And sometimes this is the lowest they give you, but a lot of times they'll give you more granularity. Then you'll have a, income statement, balance sheet, cash flow statement, or I guess that's shareholders' equity, and then here's cash flows here. So right, they were taking operating activities and just subtracting out PP&E to get their free cash flow. We may do something a little different. We'll see how we calculate it because we don't want to necessarily go with net income as our starting point. And then, some more notes on all these things, right? So definitely interesting to read through, good to read through them, understand. You'll be able to pull out kind of a higher level debt schedule from here, things of that nature. And then really what we're looking for now at this point, as I kind of get through this, right, here's the debt stuff. I'm looking for a lower level segment of revenue. So I'll still read through all of this just to kind of understand where it is. So then if I have a question later, I can kind of remember where I need to go back to. 73, they give us their effective tax rate. So this is something interesting to look at, right? Federal's 21, and they're saying they have about a 3% state tax rate, right? And we can look right here, they have wind down of certain businesses, incurred a 7.1% tax rate. If we're not expecting that next year, then the tax rate probably goes back closer to the 24% as opposed to this 33%. I don't know if all companies provide this, but it's nice that they do. And as we kind of keep going through, right, page 75, we will get more detail into the legal proceedings, so you can read about each case that they're in. They'll usually give you some high-level updates on how things are going, any material risks that they think they would highlight in there. A little note on 401k plans, disposal of assets. Let's see, is this where they talk about? Yeah, October 2020, company's retail operations in the UK. So they've held those assets for sale. And they've also done the same thing in Japan, I believe. But I don't know where that, yeah, right here, company's retail operations in Japan, this section. So talk a little bit about assets they're disposing of. And then really what we're looking for is what we're going to find down here on page 79 and 80. So now they give us revenues by US and non-US operations. And then if we come down here, we'll see US net sales by merchandise category. So this is good, right? We can look at grocery, general merchandise, health and wellness, and other. So back in the general section, they break down what those really are made up of. And I think I recorded that right here. So general merchandise, entertainment, hard lines, apparel and home, health and wellness, pharmacy, over the counter, other medical, clinical. And then grocery is kind of anything you'd see at a normal grocery store, really. And then for international, they give us by country level, so that's good. And then Sam's Club, right, they give us kind of this breakout of how it's looking by category as well. So this is probably what we would start as a baseline for our revenue forecast, is something at that level. I know somewhere they actually provided us membership revenue. I'm not seeing it here, so it might be in another table. But they did provide us with membership revenue, which is something that we might be able to then use in the Sam's Club piece to understand that aspect. But yeah, this is really what a good thing to look at, and I recorded a note of where it was in here, right? So page 79, 80. And then after this, not much left, really, just kind of some disclosures telling you to view proxy statements, and that's kind of the end of the document. So that will really wrap up the 10K and a lot of the information that I capture. And I take high-level notes so I know where to go back and reference these things. And now the next thing I want to talk about is the investor relations website. It's another place you can grab most recent conference calls and transcripts and investor presentations. So what we'll do to pull this up for any company, head on over to Google and you're going to type in whatever the company is and then investor relations. And if they're a public company in the US, they'll have an investor relations website. It'll usually be the top link. And they'll all look a little bit different, but have mostly the same information. So for here, what we can see is if we go ahead and click on events, this is usually where you'll find like investor presentations. We can see they have upcoming earnings calls. They have those scheduled out here, so you could tune in on those days and listen to them. And we can also look at kind of all the past events they've had, so a lot of virtual conferences they've attended, and then we can see here's their shareholder annual meeting, Q1 earnings release. So if we click on the Q1 earnings release, sometimes they'll have, so it doesn't look like they have a transcript for this one, but you can watch the replay. If we go back, let's click on like the annual meeting. Let's see here. Here they have a transcript, so it might take a little bit of time, or they may not be doing one. And you can, quickly read through these. These are good things to just download and kind of skim when you have time. Usually the Q&A is where a lot of the good information comes from. So important to kind of look at and read through. And if we go back to the homepage, so here's back on the homepage of the investor relations, right, they'll have some information about Walmart if you want to read through that. If you're just kind of learning about the business, financial information, this is going to be probably their most recent financial statements. Yep. Or any, I guess this is just all their SEC filings, but you can kind of, right, comparable same store sales, you could go through here and it looks like they provide us a little bit of more data there. So you can find some more information in here that can be a little bit harder sometimes to find elsewhere. Let's see, unit counts and square footage. So some good information in here probably, right? A nice little summary table. So a lot of good stuff here. And if we go back to the investor page, they also have financial fact book. So this will be kind of like supplemental information. They'll usually have some sort of investor presentation that's just like a high level summary, right? You can read about strategy of the business, consolidated financial overview. And I think a good example in this file, something you could pull out is if we look at page 7 here, right? This is comparable store sales, but they break it out by transactions, average ticket, and e-commerce. So you can kind of understand how those three factors are changing. That's really driving the overall growth of the company. So we can see transactions are down, but average ticket size is up, and then a lot of e-commerce growth as well. And then for international, we can see the growth by country. So a lot of good information there. Segment overview, they'll show us percentage of sales, whether it's grocery, general, health and wellness, other, so a lot of good stuff on that. And the same thing here for Sam's Club. So sometimes it's just the same information that you'll find in the 10K, just kind of formatted and a little bit easier to digest, but also good information nonetheless. We can see here where they're allocating capital expenditures by segment. Looks like it's mostly in the US, followed by international, and then a little bit on Sam's Club, and then corporate has a little bit as well. But we can look at, share repurchase versus dividends and how that's kind of trended. And we can see, right, share repurchase is going down, dividends has stayed pretty flat. So a lot of good information there. So this really wraps up part 2 of our series. In the next video, we're going to look at picking kind of a set of competitors and some key metrics to look up for each of those, and then how to look them up for our base company as well, just to kind of get a baseline of how our selected company really trades or performs compared to our selected set of peers. So thanks for watching. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below and I'll get back to you. Thanks.